All right, I need everyone to be really, really quiet. Can you hear that? If you listen carefully, you can hear the sweet sound of crying Democrats from sea to shining sea as Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation becomes a foregone conclusion. Ain't it a glorious melody? Never tell them who I am. Well, how dang, I'm a man. 6 shooters in both my hands. I'm a cold-blooded brother, a real bad mother. Watch out, honey, here I am. There was nothing the Democrats could do to stop what was coming. Once Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett became a foregone conclusion, and we now have the first day of hearings in the books, and there were a few takeaways from it. I actually didn't have a chance to watch it. I had to work during the day, and so I wasn't able to watch it all. But we do have here from Fox News 8 key moments of Amy Coney Barrett's first day of confirmation hearings. And, of course, the hearing was marked with controversy from the beginning, because how could it not be? You know, the Democrats have done everything they can and played every little limp-wristed trick in the book to try to convince Republicans to delay the confirmation hearings until after the election. Now, of course, with Trump in office, the Democrats are not dealing with the Republicans of old. Had this been a Mitt Romney administration or a John McCain administration, hold on, I just got a little queasy thinking of both of those, it's likely that their efforts actually would have worked. But under the Trump administration, Trump has reinvigorated the Republicans and shown the Republican senators, the Republican House, all the Republican politicians, that Americans actually want a Republican Party with, you know, a spine or some balls. And so Trump has reinvigorated the Republican Party in a way that we have not seen in a long, long time. And it has been glorious to see, and that has resulted in Amy Coney Barrett being pushed through despite all of the Democrats and leftist yells that it's unconstitutional and all this other stuff that it clearly is not. So the first day of Judge Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee concluded Monday afternoon, but not before President Trump's pick for the high court faced scathing accusations from Democrats and Republicans fired back in her defense. It's almost like there was a time before Trump when I never would have expected to hear the terms or hear the words Republicans fired back in the same sentence. So it is I just got to revel in it for a minute. You feel that? We actually have people representing us now, as opposed to going to Washington and just sitting on their hands while the Democrats run roughshod over them. So the first, we have Graham cites RGB in the shooting down of Democrat arguments. So Democrats have railed against President Trump and Senate Republicans for speedily pushing through Barrett's confirmation process, insisting that it is too close to the election and voters should get to decide in November's election who gets to fill the Supreme Court seat left vacant by the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Democratic presidential... I don't like when they say Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. It's Democrat presidential nominee. You know, the whole idea of calling the Democrats Democratic, especially in relationship to who their nominee is farcical at best. Because we all know that they rigged their primaries so that Joe Biden could be their guy. It was anything but Democratic. They are the Democrats. So, Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden has even gone so far as to say that Republicans are violating the Constitution. Yeah, tell me how. You can't even tell us what state you're in, and you want to tell us that the Democrats are violating the Constitution? Do you even remember what country's constitution you're talking about here, Joe Biden? Sometimes I don't think so. Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham, however, rejected the notion in his opening statement Monday and cited Ginsburg herself in the process. The bottom line is Justice Ginsburg, when asked about this several years ago, said a president serves for 4 years, not 3, Graham said. There is nothing unconstitutional about the process. Exactly. And that's what was... There's a great... what's the word? I guess it's schadenfreude of seeing how the Democrats always seem to shoot themselves in the foot. Whenever they try to play hardball, they tend to change the rules. And we saw that in 2013 when they tried to push through the Washington the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals judges, and they changed the rules to only need a simple majority. And Mitch McConnell said, "You will regret this, and sooner than you think." Oh, it's great to see them regretting it now. And every time they seem to do this, every time they try to change the rules because they're not winning, it always backfires on them. But they don't learn. They don't learn from their mistakes. I mean, they are the definition of insanity at this point. So Leahy claims that Barrett's confirmation could be harmful to women. Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat from Vermont, suggested that Barrett could be a potential threat to the rights of women and minorities, saying that Americans are worried that should she become a justice on the high court, her presence will set the country back decades. I think in some aspects, our country could afford to be set back a couple decades. Now, of course, not on like racial rights and things like that. Absolutely not. All men are created equal under the law and under the eyes of God. So that sort of stuff, absolutely not. That is good progress we've made. But we have also had a whole lot of progress that has been deleterious to the social fabric of this nation. And I think some of that, we no longer have that social fabric that we used to have. Now, we do need to expand the umbrella of that social fabric, but certain things, I think, draw nonlinear distinctions. And I don't want to get into too much detail about that because I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here. But let's see. So they're saying they're scared that the clock will be turned back to a time when women had no right to control their own bodies and it was acceptable to discriminate against women in the workplace. Okay, a couple things to pick apart here. First of all, women have the right to control their own bodies. They don't have the right to kill another body inside them. A human with unique DNA. They made the choice of what to do with their bodies in the creation of that baby. Now, like I said, we're not going to get into the whole rape and that kind of thing because that makes up a small percentage of pregnancies. It's not a high number. So that is a side argument that is used to chip away at the primary argument, which is women did have control over their bodies. They made a choice, and now they want to be consequence-free of those choices. Isn't it the left that always says we have freedom of speech, but that has consequences? There are consequences to your speech? Yeah, well, the sexual liberation movement of the 1960s, there are consequences to you being sexually liberated and running around and sleeping around. But they don't want the consequences of that. Now, discrimination against women in the workplace. That's a complicated issue. Because on one hand, of course, you want women to be able to go out and get jobs and that kind of thing. Another is that women are when the women integrated into the man's and into the workforce, they're essentially integrating into a man's world. And instead of integrating into the man's world, they made the man's world integrate to their sensibilities. And I do take some issues with that. I mean, do you want men that are sexually assaulting women in the workplace? Absolutely not. But when you have it where, men can't joke and talk amongst each other because there are now women in the workforce, that's something that I'm kind of like, you know what? You wanted to join the workforce. The workforce can be cutthroat. It's not always going to be this entirely civilized place, which is what the women were accustomed to making in the home. So it's really it's kind of a complicated issue. And I'm not really saying that I side either way, but let me put it this way. The HR department did not exist until women came into the workforce. So we also have the Democrat went on to claim that there is a concern that Barrett would rule in ways that would undo several other forms of equal protection under the law. What other forms? What other forms? I got a feeling she's probably talking about... Okay, so it actually goes down further. And they're scared that your confirmation will result in the rolling back of voting rights, workers' rights, and the rights of the LGBTQ community to equal treatment, Leahy said. These aren't just thoughts. These are real-life implications of decisions made by the courts. Now, voting rights. I think voting rights are too universal as it is. There was a time when you had to be a landowner in order to vote, and that's because you actually had a stake in the country you were voting on. We see all these get out the votes, specifically from Democrats, these get out the vote campaigns that try to get everybody to vote. We don't want everybody to vote. We want informed citizens to vote. We don't want people who are just voting to be part of the in crowd. I'm going to go vote for him because all my friends seem to like him. No, we don't want those votes. Those are garbage votes. Those throw off the direction of the country. Let's see. And workers' rights, okay. I'm not sure what specifically they're talking about there. And the rights of the LGBTQ community to equal treatment. I got a feeling what he's talking about there is gay marriage, and even still, I'm not a huge fan of gay marriage, but to me, that's because I think that what gay marriage did was it singularly redefined what marriage is supposed to be. Difference in sex was a huge part of what marriage is because essentially marriage is the building block of the family unit. It is the foundational principle of the family unit, which should be the smallest form of government in America. I don't even agree that a man and a woman who don't intend to have children should get married. So why would I agree that a man and a woman can get married? They can't have children. I think marriage is about procreation. I believe traditionally speaking, for thousands upon thousands of years, that is what marriage was supposed to be. But we don't get that anymore. It's just about a man and a woman who love each other. You don't need marriage for that. It's not... You don't need to marry each other. If you love each other and it's enduring, then you just stay together. Now, I understand the whole idea of tax benefits, which is why I think civil unions were fine. But chipping away at the definition of marriage chips away at the idea of the family unit, the family structure being the building block of society, which I think is so far gone it's hardly even recognizable anymore. But I think a return to that would be a good thing. Another reason why moving back certain elements of society back a couple decades I think could be a good thing. Back when we had certain understandings that are now lost in the movements that started in the 60s and have progressed ever since. So Sass rips the court for packing as partisan suicide bombing. Senator Ben Sass of Nebraska used his opening statement to give the viewing public and his Senate colleagues a civics lesson explaining the difference between normal partisan politics and disagreements and aspects of normal government function that should be agreed upon by all. Yeah, that is true. We have certain ways that our government is supposed to work, and that's just how it operates. We're going to disagree with the arguments and how it goes, but the actual process of moving things forward should not be disagreed upon. And that's where we end up getting the Democrats, whenever they're losing, they try to change the rules. So in that vein, he warned that the call from Democrats to eliminate the filibuster so they could expand the size of the Supreme Court and load it with liberal justices, commonly referred to as court packing, would be an end to the Senate as they know it. Yeah, it's completely blowing apart the checks and balances and the system set forth in the Constitution. It is actually going more towards a direct democracy when you do that, because all you need is a simple majority. And we all know that direct democracy is nothing but two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. It allows the majority to run roughshod over the minority. Something that out of one side of the mouth, the Democrats loathe, when you're talking about intersectional groups, but when it comes to the accumulation of power for their coalition, it's a whole different story. Court packing is the idea that we should blow up our shared civics and that we should end the deliberative structure of the Senate by making it just another majoritarian body for the purposes of packing the Supreme Court, Sass said. Court packing would depend on the destruction of the full debate here in the Senate, they misspelled here, and it is partisan suicide bombing that would end the deliberative structure of the United States Senate and make this job less interesting for all 100 of us. I don't really care about the job being interested for all 100 of you. That's not my concern. My concern is, though, that it would be the destruction of the full debate in the Senate. You should be able to win over people from both sides of the court. But if you have just a simple majority, all you need is more Democrats. And of course, they're also talking about trying to shoehorn in Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as new states, simply because they know that they would be Democrat majority. Again, changing the rules. Dems claim Trump chose Barrett to be a judicial torpedo aimed at Obamacare. So what if she is? Let's get rid of Obamacare. It was a disaster from the beginning. All it did Sure, it expanded more people getting insurance, but it also made insurance premiums for regular working class Americans extremely high and unaffordable. Because, of course, the Affordable Care Act is a misnomer, just like everything that the Democrats and the left in general tries to put out. A major theme of Democrats' attack on Barrett appeared to be the idea that President Trump nominated her due to her attitude towards the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, with oral arguments coming up in November in a case that could potentially spell the end of it. Let's get rid of it. Several senators insisted that this case, which will be heard 1 week after the presidential election, is the real reason why Republicans are hurrying to confirm Barrett. Who cares? Who cares? Even if that is their reason, I don't think that is their reason. It might be part of many reasons. Also, I think bringing in a bunch of 2A Second Amendment cases to the Supreme Court that they've been pushing down to the back burner because they weren't sure they could pass, I think that's a good reason. Also, because a contested election. We can't have a 4-4 split on the Supreme Court if we have a contested election. Our guy's the incumbent. He's the one who got to nominate as listed by the Constitution. So, the American people spoke. They chose. We're exercising the power they gave us. Don't know what to tell you. President Trump has repeatedly indicated that he will nominate a judge who would rule against Obamacare, and Barrett, prior to becoming a federal judge, criticized the Supreme Court's 2012 decision that upheld it. Oh, God, that face of Kamala Harris is so gross. Let's see. Democratic vice presidential nominee Senator Kamala Harris said that Republicans want to confirm Barrett in time to ensure that they can strip away the protections in the Affordable Care Act. It's kind of funny because they're going after the Affordable Care Act. It kind of seems like not what they really want to go after her for. I feel like they actually want to go after her for her religious views and just the fact that she is a conservative, but I think they can't do that because it'll look too bad right before the election. They can't risk having another Kavanaugh effect, which I think they're aware of, which is maybe they learned from that mistake, but even still, they're finding ways to go after her, and they're going to do it because the Democrats have been doing this ever since Robert Bork. Robert Bork was a perfectly qualified judicial nominee, but because of Roe vs. Wade, they vilified him, and then they continue that on to Clarence Thomas, and they have continued doing that to conservative and originalist Supreme Court nominees ever since. So, Senator Chris Coons gave Barrett the benefit of the doubt by not accusing her of making... All right, I'm not going to read what he said. Who cares? So, Lee comes out of coronavirus isolation and attends the hearing in person. That's cool. Senator Mike Lee, I like Mike Lee a lot, had tested positive for coronavirus, and he said he'd quarantine himself for 10 days before returning to work. He says, I feel great. Senator Tom Tillis, who was diagnosed with COVID-19 more recently, participated virtually. Harris also participated remotely, criticized Chairman Graham for bringing together more than 50 people to sit in a room for hours while our nation faces a deadly airborne virus. Get over it! It's not that deadly, especially with all of the new treatments that we have for it. The Democrats just sound like such cowards. And this is something about the Democrats that we've been seeing for a while now. They push weakness upon people. And they do this because they know that weak-willed people are easily controlled. They're malleable. And so they use this fear to weaken people against their abuses of power. And they continue to do that. And if a lot of these people, they're not this weak in real life. They put out this message because they think it appeals to people's emotions, which in turn softens them, which in turn makes them controllable. It's part of a strategy on behalf of the left. This committee has ignored common sense requests to keep people safe, including not requiring testing for all members despite a coronavirus outbreak among senators on this very committee. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo, Kamala. You'll be fine. You guys are U.S. senators. You're not going to die from coronavirus. Durbin claims that Trump wants Barrett confirmed because of possibility of contested election. Sure. Yeah, we can't have a 4-4. I already said that. Senator Dick Durbin said President Trump nominated Barrett to the Supreme Court to do his political chores and rule in his favor on any election contest during the opening portion of Barrett's confirmation hearing. Now, imagine the shoe being on the other foot. Do you actually expect Dick Durbin would not want to push through a leftist activist judge in order to rule in their favor for a contested election? It's so funny hearing the Democrats when they try to accuse the right of doing things that they know very well that they would do if they were the ones in power. But they're not in power because the American people didn't give them the power. So President Trump has made it clear he wants another of his appointees on the Supreme Court before the election because he anticipates court challenges over the vote. Yes, the reason we anticipate court challenges over the vote is because you, the Democrats, decided to change the rules at the 11th hour and push in this mail-in balloting nonsense that is rife with possibilities for fraud and election interference. It's you guys that started the ball rolling on this. Now you want to try to condemn Trump and his nominee for protecting himself against the actions that you took to try to undermine the election security. So sick of these Democrats. Let's see. Said Durbin, a top-ranking Democrat. President Trump has indicated he'd be perfectly happy to have the close election decided by a 6-3 majority 6-3 conservative majority Supreme Court rather than by the votes of the American people. That is not true. That is not true. They're saying because you changed the rules and are going to disenfranchise likely millions of voters with your mail-in balloting nonsense, then it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. Because you, Democrats, changed the rules. And a hilarious story that I saw recently, you know, like this ties back to what I was talking about, the Democrats pushing weakness and pushing fear on the American people. A lot of these Democrats are getting their mail-in ballots, and then they're so scared of coronavirus, they're actually disinfecting their ballots and smearing the ink, which will make them null and void. Oh, it's hilarious. Now, look, I want everybody's vote to count. But it is just funny watching Democrats shoot themselves in the foot, cock the hammer back again, aim to their other foot, shoot that, and say, why do Republicans keep doing this to us? So Ernst and Hawley defended Barrett from attacks on faith. Before her confirmation hearing even began, Barrett, a mother of 7, faced scrutiny and criticism over her Roman Catholic faith. Media reports likened a religious organization with which she is affiliated to the dystopian television show The Handmaid's Tale. And during her 7th Circuit confirmation hearing in 2017, Senator Dianne Feinstein told Barrett that the dogma lives loudly within you, which is of concern. I'm so tired of these lefty... I mean, I guess you could say that it cuts both ways, honestly, if I'm being directly honest. You know, they like to use these fictional stories as ways to draw parallels to what conservatives are trying to do. And this Handmaid's Tale has been one that has been a go-to for them, where these women are just forced to be baby factories, essentially, and that they're nothing more than just things to create babies out of. That is so not true. That is so not true. And it also undermines the importance of the role of promulgating new human life. I mean, that's an amazing, amazing responsibility to have. So, first of all, they take offense where offense shouldn't be taken. But it's ridiculous to think that women are just going to be nothing but, like, enslaved baby makers. But to be fair, on the right, we do cite 1984 quite a bit. The parallels are far more striking between the Democrats, because 1984 was actually supposed to represent a communist society in Western civilization. So the parallels are actually accurate and drawn. The book, The Handmaid's Tale, I believe was actually a criticism of Islam. It criticized Islamic cultures and Islamic like Sharia law and that kind of thing. And then when they made it into a TV show, they decided to change it to Christianity. So there's a complete pivot made there where the parallels just don't line up. Where in comparisons like 1984, they actually line up pretty well. So such an avenue of attack was a major concern to Senator Josh Hawley. This freedom of conscience and religious liberty undergirds all of our other rights because it tells the government that it cannot tell us what to think or who we can assemble with or how we can worship, Hawley said. The bedrock principle of American liberty is now under attack. That is what is at stake when we read these stories attacking Judge Barrett for her faith. And that's very true. And we have religious freedom, but because you are a religious person doesn't mean that it null and voids you from a role in the government. Even people in government have the right to religious liberty. Even judges. So that's what's at stake when my Democratic colleague, stop saying Democratic, guys, it's Democrat, colleagues, repeatedly questioned Judge Barrett and others about their religious beliefs. Senator Joni Ernst similarly stood by Barrett's. What our political opponents want to paint you as is a TV or cartoon version of a religious radical. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Adding that a so-called handmaid that feeds into all the ridiculous stereotypes that they have set out to lambast people of faith in America, and that's wrong. And that's because the left relies on atheism. We can go back to the Bolshevik Revolution, where Vladimir Lenin directly said that our program directly relies on the propaganda of atheism. That's because people need a higher power. And when the higher power is not of this earth, then we are not going to be controlled by other people of this earth. When we don't have that, when our higher power is not outside of the realm of humanity, that's maybe a wrong way to say it, outside the realm of humanity, because God created humanity, but supersedes the realm of humanity. Let's put it that way. Supersedes the realm of humanity. Then they're going to turn to human-driven power structures as that supreme power. And that's when you get into very, very dangerous territory. That's when you get to autocratic, tyrannical territory. So that's why we see that the left has almost taken on a religious, with intersectionality, it's almost a religion. Communism becomes a religious devotion. It's because they don't have something that supersedes what is tangible here on earth to be their supreme ruler, their supreme being, I guess you could say. Let's just keep it simple. Supreme being. And so they turn to other people, which are no better than them. They're just as flawed as them. You never look sideways to look for something above you. You should always look above you for what's above you. But people, we're all flawed. No matter what kind of propaganda they put out, no matter what message they preach, if you turn sideways to those people, they're going to be on the same plane as you. That is why religion is important, because what you look up to is above us. It aims for us to be better than what we're capable of being. You don't get that from left-wing ideology, from these pseudo-religions of worshiping of ideas promulgated by other people. So she says, I'm struck by the irony of how demeaning to women their accusations really are, Ernst continued. That you, a working mother of 7 with a strong record of professional and academic accomplishment, could possibly respect the goals and desires of today's women. Yeah, that is absolutely absurd. She seems to be both very ambitious and also a good mother. So, the original idea of feminism was that they could have it all. Well, Amy Coney Barrett is proving that to be correct. But they don't really want it all. They want one thing in sacrifice of another. They want women to be in the workforce in sacrifice of raising a family. Barrett tells committee courts should not try to do Congress's job. Oh, come on. Don't update my thing while I'm recording. While I'm giving an applause to Amy Coney Barrett. Damn it. All right, so in her opening statement on Monday, Barrett emphasized the role of the judicial branch and said it is not the court's duty to solve every problem or right every wrong in American life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government should be made by the political branches elected by the accountable people, Barrett said. The court should not expect the public should not expect courts to do so, and the court should not try. What a great message. Because what we're seeing from the left is, and especially we saw this with Roe versus Wade. I've talked about this before, how Roe versus Wade was a circumvention of the amendment process, which is supposed to go through the legislative branch. And they instead use the judiciary to go outside of their realm of power to rule that abortions are a constitutional right. So we've seen this for years, activist judges superseding what they're supposed to do. And we haven't had anybody check them for it. You know, the judges who ruled on Roe versus Wade should have been impeached for going outside of the scope of their job. The checks and balances system in American governments is so important to the functionality of our nation that when you're superseding that, when you're undermining it, you shouldn't have your office. You are violating your oath of office. And that's another thing that I've talked about on this channel, that I think we need stricter enforcement of oaths of offices. Oaths of office? Oaths of offices? I don't know. How do you say that? Let me know in the comment section. But we need a way to hold these judges accountable. And at this point, they have not. The system of checks and balances is so broken that we have the Supreme Court, which has no checks and balances on its power and seem to be legislating from the bench. Not their job. Barrett aligned her legal philosophy with the late Justice Antonin Scalia, a member of the court's conservative wing for whom she previously clerked. It was the content of Justice Scalia's reasoning that shaped me. His judicial philosophy was straightforward. A judge must apply the law as written, not as she wishes it were. Sometimes that approach meant reaching results that he did not like, Barrett told senators. And that's very good. That's yes. Sometimes, as a judge, you're going to have to rule in a fashion that you personally disagree with. That is the job. Now, one thing that I'm not a huge fan of, I was a big fan of Scalia, and I do like Amy Coney Barrett a lot. I do take some umbrage with their affinity for stare decisis. I'm not a huge fan of stare decisis. That means if something was ruled on previously, then it should stand. Because we actually have to undo some of the activism that has occurred on the Supreme Court. And even and the appellate courts as well. All of the courts. There's been too much activism, especially from the left, going on, and I think that some of these rulings should be overturned, which is why I'm not a fan of stare decisis. Just because they ruled it doesn't mean it's now so. We should be able to go back and fix what they broke. Anyways, guys, that's the video. I'm looking forward to reporting more on Amy Coney Barrett as her confirmation is a foregone conclusion, essentially, at this point. But anyways, let me know what you thought in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we all know it's voices like mine that are first to be taken out back in old Yellard by the folks at Big Tech. Also, if you'd like to follow me on any of those Big Tech platforms, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Parler, and Instagram at Ram Thorburn. Also on mindsandpill.net, also at Ram Thorburn. And if you'd like to contribute to the channel, there are links to my Subscribestar, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.